Thanks, Dave. And now for today's keynote. Good friend of ours who has the daunting task of breaking down the ad technology landscape and discussing how the players compete, cooperate, and connect. Please join me in welcoming Doug Weaver, founder and chief executive officer of the Upstream Group.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Awesome. Yeah, nothing like a rainy day and a conference about technology, right? That'll get you out of bed. So, first of all, I wanted to say thank you to Randall, to David, to the board, to Lisa, everybody for having me up here. It's really an honor. A little bit of a homecoming. I was actually part of one of the earliest boards of the IAB way back in the mid-1990s. And I was reminded that back then we used coal-powered projectors and wood-fired computing devices. So it wasn't too different from that. So you'll notice that the title of my talk is a little different than what's in your agendas. It was a work in progress really over the last few days because I really felt like I wanted to come here and try to make a difference for this group. So I think the first thing that any speaker should do when they get up with an opportunity like this is to justify their existence. Talk about exactly why I should be up here and why you should spend this 25 minutes, which is actually perfectly good BlackBerry and iPhone time. Why should you spend it with me? Why not play another game of Angry Birds? Okay. I think there's three reasons. First of all, I have nothing to sell you. I have no imminent deal for my company. I'm a lousy stock investor. I've got no axe to grind in this whole debate. So I think I'm a fairly rare commodity, right? So if we're really going to preach this message of, kumbaya, let's get together, let's all work together, you need Switzerland. So that's me. Second, I think I'm pretty good at pattern recognition, right? It's what I do in my blog, The Drift, each week. I try to help people see the industry very plain. So I'm going to try to take a very complex situation. I will talk to you, I'll be candid with you. When it comes to complexity, this is like Middle East complexity here, right? So we're going to get into that a little bit more, but I'm going to take my best shot at trying to help sort all that out. And then finally, I've always believed that action forms around a point of view. You may love some of the things that I say, you may hate other ones, you may think I'm a complete moron up here. Doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that the things that I talk about over the next 20 minutes or so are actually going to get you guys to talk more during the conference, that it's going to form new conversations, force people to look at things in a slightly different way. So to that end, you have the hashtag for the event. How many people here are tweeting or otherwise connected to devices? Okay, so please, if you have, if you are, use the hashtag, talk about it, you share some of this conversation with the outside world. You can also use, you can barely see it down at the bottom there, but my Twitter user handle is there. So I have my tablet up here, direct message. If you have questions, thoughts, etc. If you think I'm going off course, let me know, and we'll keep this conversation going. So, okay, full disclosure. After 17 years in this business, I still am not completely sure what an algorithm is. So maybe I'm not alone in that, but I think basically I'm starting off with the assumption that most of the people in this room have forgotten more about technology than I'm probably ever going to learn. And I think that's okay, because we don't need one more mathematician. We don't need one more technologist. So what I decided to do, though, was I've seen a lot of algorithms. I mean, I've seen them written down, and they look kind of cool, and they look very scientific. So I decided to kind of create my own version. So I call it a Dougarithm. Okay, so this is just my way of kind of explaining where I think we are and kind of how things have played out. So bear with me on this, okay? So first of all, we started off a long time ago when publishers had unsold inventory, okay? Add to that the fact that agencies, that's the A here, had unfilled planning capacity. They just couldn't make sense of the rest of the web. That gave birth to the ad network. So the first sort of big bang in our world was the creation of ad networks. Now, the ad networks then did a great thing. They divided what they were getting based on some pretty smart technology and data, right? So, so they ended up, creating a lot of great things. They created some great things. They had some tremendous margins. As I'll say later on, it's been a great business to be in for the last 7 or 8 years, the ad network business. However, they also created some channel conflict. And then there was also the ever-present issue of scale. How can we do this on a grand scale? How can we do it on a massive scale? How can we do it on a scale big enough to accommodate all that TV money that's going to come in from other places? Okay? So this leads us to the next big bang, which is the creation of ad exchanges. Okay? So the ad exchange comes out. Suddenly we've got this big pool. We're going to bring Wall Street level technology and trading. So we end up coming up with a great tool to dip into these ad exchanges, that being the demand-side platform. So this technology comes in. It's a great mitigator for this. We then add on top of that, the agencies step in and say, aha, this is our moment. We can slap our logos on top of some of this DSP technology, create these trading desks, which are going to become our buying engines. And by the way, we will subtract that margin that those networks are getting. That $2 that the networks are keeping out of every buy, that comes back to us. This is all going to work out great, isn't it? In fact, what this is going to amount to, agency profit and scale growing geometrically, right? We are going to solve the buying problem, process efficiency for all. Hallelujah. There's more to the message, though, because a couple of things happen along the way. Suddenly, the clients who were supposed to embrace this as a branding medium, the clients who were supposed to pour TV money into here, kind of didn't go along with the program, at least not yet. Instead, prices remain very, very low. I think a lot of the agencies were looking at this really as nothing more than just another extension of the direct response model. Plus, the premium publishers, that's the P here, essentially said, with these exchanges, no thanks. We're really not going to put any premium content into those exchanges. In fact, we're going to kind of keep our distance in this model because it's looking a little too dicey for us. Okay, which leads us to where we're next, which is in sort of a stalemate. Okay, so the stalemate then creates some creative thinking. We say, wait a minute, if our clients, the agency's clients, are saying we don't want to choose between scale and efficiency and quality content, so we're going to instead, so we want you to figure that out. So we'll figure that out. So we're going to create the private exchange. Aha, buzzword of the year. So the private exchange comes along. Now, as I see it, these private exchanges, where a publisher agrees to sort of, on a limited basis and with specific ground rules, make their inventory, their tier 2 inventory available for bidding, this could go one of 3 different ways. The publishers could collectively say, nah, no thanks, not worth the hassle. And I think there's going to be a big sort of pricing consideration in them making that determination. They could agree to transact with the agencies. They could go full bore into this conversation. Or they could essentially wait it out and decide, you know what, we'll do this, but we'll do it directly with the clients, right? There's plenty of technology companies out there. You, the agency holding company, you're just a logo on top of that technology in many cases. Are you really adding the value? Should I really go through you? Or is there a future where I deal directly with the client? In any case, none of this stuff is going to happen anytime fast. So we head back towards stalemate. Now, what makes the stalemate kind of a little uncomfortable for a lot of us is that the clock is running. You have an awful lot of companies in that wonderful Terry Kawaja slide that from this point forward, Terry will just be known as the slide. So the slide is out there, and all those companies are out there, and the clock is running on them. They've got VCs who heard Terry's presentation a year ago here, and they're going, hey, what's getting kind of crowded, and the space is getting it's getting a little ripe in there. We need our money back. So suddenly things are starting to heat up a little bit in terms of the pressure. So we enter into what I call the P3 era, which is where we are now, which is panic, posturing, and pressure. So I've never been accused of being subtle, so let me put it another way. So fear not, because I think there's a way out. If you're trying to solve some kind of a concrete puzzle, when we were trying to figure out if the Russians had nukes and how many and how far they could shoot and so forth, that's a puzzle that's got an answer. If you can solve that, get more data. More data is a good thing. But when you're trying to solve a complex sort of Byzantine problem, something that's really asymmetrical, the Middle East, the stock crisis, what have you, sometimes more data is not the answer. Sometimes instead, it's more important to focus on the right questions. If you ask the right questions, they will help you make the right decisions. They'll help you think about things in a different way. So what I've come up with today are what I think are the 9 disruptive questions that I think we should be asking each other, asking ourselves, asking any potential business partners. And I think these are what is going to help us navigate the labyrinth that's ahead. So, the aforementioned the slide. Terry, I owe you $3. By the way, you guys didn't realize this, but Terry Kawaja actually does get $3. He's got a micropayment system. He gets $3 every time this slide is actually shown. So, the first question we have to ask ourselves is, does the customer, the marketer, not their designated tech geek, does the marketer really care about the same things that we do? We seem absolutely fixated on this slide. We cover the horse race. Does the client care that much? Not so much. While we're obsessing about the details of RTB and DSP and data optimization, the brand marketers that we claim to serve, those people who we're trying to set the table for, are perfectly content to let us squabble in obscurity about all these technical details. Meanwhile, they are still apparently just as much in love with television as they've ever been, even though that relationship with television has been largely an abusive one. I mean, they're getting less for more every year. They keep lining up record upfronts. By all accounts, record upfronts this month here in New York. So, I think what we've done is we've collectively managed to take something that's very big and profound and has a tremendous imagination behind it, and somehow make it look both Byzantine and mundane at the same time. So assuming that the client really cares about this debate may be the first big mistake that we make. Leads me to my second question. What exactly is the better future that we're conjuring for the marketer? You know, one of the tenets in sales, and one of the things that I do for a living, is to work with sales teams, and I always tell them, great salespeople always tie whatever it is that they're selling or representing to a better future. They talk not about the speeds and feeds, but they talk about sort of what the client's life is going to be like, how it's going to change, how it's going to become better, once this change comes into place. Making response rates marginally better, making ad delivery a little bit cheaper is not a vision, right? That's not a vision for a better future. Marketers want to latch onto something exciting and positive and creative and expansive. We'd be better off talking to them about what they're going to do with the money they save than in how we're going to save it for them. Everything that we talk about, by comparison with what TV talks about, ends up sounding like clipping coupons, right? Hey, there's $1 off Huggies, rush over to the store. Yeah, not going to get it done. If the message about how your particular company's offerings lead to a better future is not being heard by the marketers, you've got a sales problem. If everyone in your own company doesn't know what the message is, or if you don't have one, you've got a leadership problem. Now, one of the latest memes going around is Kendall Allen's idea that we've fallen into a math state. She wrote about this on the Ad Age blog last week, and there's a lot of debate going back and forth. And I love that whole idea of a math state. A bunch of people with slide rules sort of rounding up people and bringing them to the detention centers. Well, we are a math state, and that's okay. It's a little bit of a problem, but it's really only half the problem. The big question that we need to ask at this juncture is whether we're even focused on the right branches of math. Today, 17 years later, we are still shackled to the legacy of a direct response business. We are building and iterating on top of a direct response mindset. Okay, that's the way it is. As a result, we always end up defaulting to 2 branches of math, division and subtraction. How can we make it smaller? How can we take cost away? We use targeting to narrow every transaction and ultimately make every buy smaller. We continue to slice the bean ever more finely, and it ends up satisfying and nourishing no one. Now, I believe that if we're to achieve sustained growth and continue to shift dollars from broadcast, and that's what this is really all about, into digital channels, then we must focus on how we add value to marketing and how we multiply its value. We must get back to talking about transformative possibilities and not try to get there one transaction, one savings at a time. It's too long of a slog, and we won't make the journey. So this one ought to perk a couple people up. I think that it's a healthy question to ask at this point whether the trading desks, the holding company trading desks, will in fact be a permanent part of our landscape. Now, we've talked incessantly about them over the last couple of years. They're the poster child for overexposure in the trade press. But let's look at some of the recent facts. Okay? Trade news reports coming out that are telling us that these trading desks are coming up short. They're coming up short on their goals, mixed results, clients are not all that excited, et cetera, right? So even compared with the work of dedicated media teams, not only are they not fixing the scale problem, but they're also not even necessarily getting the kind of cost savings for the agency, for the clients that they would want. Second, we've seen many of the early leaders in this space, I'm talking about actual people, personalities, walk away. We've seen people step down, we've seen them take other jobs. So we have to ask ourselves whether technology leadership will find a cultural home within the agency holding company. And third, you have to wonder if the clients, the marketers, the people whose money this is, the ones that are funding this little love fest, are really engaged and vested in this process as much as the agency holding companies are. Their media dollars are the ones that are going to fund what is essentially the re-engineering of an agency process. So I wonder if that mandate is open-ended, whether that commitment is forever. I'm not sure it is. So suffice to say that it's healthy for everybody in the landscape to ask this fundamental existential question. Are the trading desks going to be around? Do they have a right to exist? What form will they take? And I think that the chief among them, the one who should really be asking that question, are the holding companies themselves. Now, whatever the long-term fate of the trading desks, their short-term impact on the world of ad networks has been very pronounced. So as I said earlier, ad networks have had a pretty terrific run over the last 7 years. They've served as the outsourced planning muscle and scale for the agency planning business. Okay? They have made sense of the rest of the web. And they've done a good job. They've done a pretty good job at it. And along the way, they've developed some remarkable capabilities and resources and capital. But time has changed. Your biggest customer, the agencies, have decided to compete with you. They've decided to commoditize your offerings, to put you in a cattle pen that leads to the trading desk and essentially try to dictate your future. When that happens, when your best customer competes with you and decides to take back the margin that's been your lifeblood, I think anybody would agree that it's time for a new strategy. And as I said in my blog 3 weeks ago, I think this just may be the network's moment. Now, clearly, there's going to be a thinning of the herd, right? We all saw 350 ad networks all kind of emerge like mushrooms after a rainstorm a few years ago and just pop out of the ground. Well, that can't be sustained. I think no one thinks that many ad networks is a good thing. So there won't be that many. There'll be a fraction of that number. The ones that survive are going to make moves. They're going to make them soon. Some will acquire content assets. Others are going to double down on technology. Others are going to try to become the marketplaces in which they will compete. So whatever these moves that they make, they must make them soon. It's clearly a time for leadership in the space, and I'm confident that the best are already laying out those new visions for their companies. One more thought on this. Everybody likes to talk about the ad network model, right? Is the ad network model going to succeed? Well, one of the things that I've always thought is that models don't succeed or fail. Companies do. Right? And in fact, I think you're going to start to see some of these companies not look at all like they've looked in the past. I think there's potentially a real creative renaissance, and a business renaissance that's going to go on within their ranks very soon. And I, for one, am looking forward to watching it. Which leads me to the next fundamental existential question for us. Who's in this for the long haul? Now, I used to think that the most common lines in every internet business plan were, and then we'll sell advertising, followed by, and then someone will buy us. Now, these two lines have since been joined by, we're just an add-on to the CPM. We're just an extra couple of shekels tacked onto the CPM. Nobody's going to notice. Yes, they will. As I said earlier, we're now in this P3 era, panic, posturing, and pressure. There are a great many companies with jumpy investors who are looking for action and soon, right? I think we need to look at two fundamental realities, right? First, that few extra pennies in the CPM, that's not realistic at a time when the agencies are working night and day to try and squeeze every penny out of the buy and shift cost over to the publisher. The publishers are not going to pick up one more cost for one more level of service along the way. Second, while this market that we're in will continue to grow, clearly, it won't be in a hurry to anoint winners. And don't look for it to really clear up anytime soon. Despite all the panic, we may be preparing for a war of attrition. We may be preparing for a long slog. And I think we have to ask ourselves as we look at potential business partners, investments, people that we want to spend our intellectual capital with, we have to ask, who's built for that? Who's built for a sustained campaign that may go years into the future? So built to flip is out, built to last is in. To many people in our space, content is another commodity. It's something to be generated at the lowest possible cost, optimized so that search engines will find it, and then evaluated based on its yield. It's become the processed corn of our agribusiness. We have to ask ourselves what this attitude means to the long-term sustainability of our ecosystem for brand advertisers. Those advertisers continue to pour money into television, and I have to think it's at least in part because TV still has a few hits, a handful of recognizable personalities, and some catchphrases that end up in the popular culture. That's what she said. Our collective inattention to the real value of content is, I believe, sowing the seeds of our ultimate irrelevance in the brand conversation. If we treat content like a commodity, then marketers are going to treat us like a commodity. Now, in fact, I could also argue that the parallel trend of audience targeting may actually be disincenting those who might otherwise create great, valuable content. Why spend the time and money imbuing your site with personality and attitude if its ultimate financial value is going to be completely driven by the unseen hand of data enhancement? Folks, we need to stay in the business of creating Jon Stewart's and Oprah Winfrey's and Michael Scott's. We need our recognizable rooms and memorable moments. That is something that marketers can hold on to. Speaking of recognizable media, I think it's important if we ask this question and imagine a digital marketplace with no ESPN, Turner, Condé Nast, Time Inc., or NBC. Would the marketplace be as rich and deep without NASCAR and SpongeBob SquarePants? Would it be as appealing to brand marketers without the New York Times or the NBA? Just as the elite and talented walked away from society and Atlas shrugged, so too may all of today's prestige brands say no to the marketplace that you're all here to build. Without the presence of media brands like these, I think our marketplace begins to look a lot more like a flea market. I think that ship may have already sailed when it comes to the large public exchanges. Now the mini trend is about private exchanges, which prestige media brands are cautiously considering at this point. But unless agencies set realistic pricing expectations for what it costs to play there, these private markets with clients may never take shape. It's entirely possible that that ship may pull away empty as well. And my final question is, I think, an important one to close on. Certainly, last but not least, we have to ask, what about the consumer? What exactly is the value that we're promising in exchange for all this tracking and technology? How pure and how genuine is our commitment to privacy and security? Now, from my perspective, I think our value promise to the consumer has actually been pretty flabby over the years. We tell them they're going to get better advertising. Hasn't really happened. That same consumer is still getting carpet bombed with vacation ads that, for some destination that they went to 3 years ago. It's not looking all that much better to them. Secondly, we tell them, but we're going to keep the internet for free. I don't think the consumer sees it that way. To the consumer, they say, well, hey, wait a minute, the internet's not free. I pay Comcast $30 a month for it. Don't tell me it's free. It's my internet. So they're not buying into either one of these premises. And while I very much appreciate all the lobbying and public relations work the IAB is doing, and they're doing stellar work, I think that we're fools if we think data won't continue to be a potent political issue for many years to come. And the day that the consumer says, stop, all this stops. Let's never forget the do not call legislation went through Congress faster than the declaration of war on Japan after Pearl Harbor. It's time to start truly creating a better data experience for the consumer, creating a better experience for the consumer based on the data that they trust us with. It's time to take a proactive and positive approach to privacy, to make it a core value to to what our companies stand for. Make it a core part of our brand promise. In fact, it's long past time. So if you found some of these questions and ideas helpful, I hope you'll tell someone. If you think I'm completely out of my mind, I hope you'll tell somebody that too. Above all, I hope that the point of view that I've brought up here today serves as a catalyst for debate, for discussion, and that it makes your time together at this conference a bit more focused and memorable. Now, I think we may have time for one question or something. We're just about to the end of the clock here. But I'll be posting some thoughts from this speech on my blog. Oops. Put that other slide back up, please. I'll be posting some thoughts from the speech on my blog. Continue the conversation there, getthedrift.com. And I want to close with a thought from Marshall McLuhan. He said that each new technology turns its predecessor into an art form. And I think that's very profound because the technology is never going to stop. We can continue to engage in the arms race of feature by feature firefight that keeps going on forever and ever, chasing that elusive technical perfection. Or we can stop for a minute and we can contemplate the art form. We can contemplate how do we create value with what's here today? How do we turn an art into this? Because at the end of the day, I think what the marketer buys from us is art, not science. Thank you very much. Can we stick around or no?
Yeah, you should. I think we're going to take one question for Doug.
One question.
Do we have a mic, Lisa, or is there a hand out there?
Everybody's thinking, is my question that good? That it'll be the one question?
Randall.
Doug, since you mentioned it, you raised the A word, the agency word. Let's go a little bit deeper into that. The agencies have very little history of investing in technology. They certainly not an industry known for hiring trading talent away from Goldman Sachs. Mm-hmm. What kind of path can you see for agencies playing a role in this? Or is it kind of fated that they kind of ease themselves out and that an alternative industry grow up in their place?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the agencies can play a role, but I think fundamentally they have to embrace a model that's much more open in nature. I think part of the problem with the agency model, as I've seen it over my career, is that everything's a zero-sum game. It's a closed environment, right? They want to own the relationship, they want to own the marketplace, they want to control everything about the process. And I think inherently this is all a very open marketplace. I think the natural role for the agency to play for their client is as sort of Sherpa and ombudsman, the person who's brokering the relationships and finding the best technology, not trying to sort of lock down and control something. I think currently what's happened is that most of the trading desks, from my point of view, I think most of the trading desks have simply taken the same thinking that they've brought to the direct response buying and then just try to sort of get more of it, right? So they're not going to get there, playing the same song they've played so far. But I think the agencies can embrace this model. They can make a difference in this marketplace, but I'm not sure that they have the people or the right mindset yet in order to do it. Right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.